folks. Welcome to the sig-testing meeting. I think today might be a short one, but that should be fine. As always, if there is anybody who is new here and would like to unmute and go ahead and give a brief introduction, you are welcome to. Otherwise, we will carry on with the agenda.
Hey, hi there. Lino, nice to meet you. I want to know more about what you're doing. First time I'm attending a Kubernetes meeting. So yeah, looking forward to see how I can help and contribute.
Yeah. There's definitely, if you want to check things out in the test info repo, that is where a lot of our stuff is. I'm also sure Patrick, for instance, can speak more to the EDE framework and stuff like that. But we largely are split with either EDE framework or tooling concerns for the Kubernetes project. So yeah, if you don't see anything in this particular meeting as well, there's definitely the repo and other things like the Slack channel and whatnot to check out.
Yeah, I've seen some movement on the pro meeting. So
awesome.
Yeah, that's definitely where we need help.
So.
Awesome. Seems great. I want to go and understand a bit more before being able to contribute. Yep.
Yeah.
So
cool.
Yep. That's all for me.
Yeah, the tooling was mentioned. So E2E framework, testing packages. That's something kind of I have an interest in. I'm a tech lead in sig-testing for that area. Basically everything E2E framework, runtime, Ginkgo related, but also unit testing, integration testing. That's something where I'm engaged. A bit less on, well, definitely not in Pro. I know nothing about it except that I'm using it heavily. But yeah, and jobs, kind of, I help organizing them a little bit, but we have Ben the Elder, who has much more experience. I don't think he's here today, but that is our other tech lead, and Antonio is the third one, also for, well, general stuff, basically keeping the project healthy. Yeah, and I'm trying to join the meeting a bit more regularly. We have a problem with our tech leads. We are all very busy, but I try to carve out the time for the meeting to keep it interesting, because if we don't discuss the things that are going on here, no one else is going to be able to join in. So yeah.
As always, Slack channel is also good for just keeping async communications as well, but it is always nice to be able to discuss these things real time too. So yeah. Cool. I think with that, Patrick, I think you got the first item.
Yep. Okay. So that's basically a follow-up to the meeting from 2 weeks ago. I was pointing out that I was struggling with stabilizing one pull request and saw lots of flakes in integration and unit tests. I was trying to mitigate those flakes by giving unit tests more CPU time, basically running them with higher priority than, say, compile jobs, or other jobs, other unit test packages that are known to be resilient to delays. In the end, it turns out that none of this really was necessary. And that's good, because our unit tests should be written so that they are resilient against real-world timing, and they shouldn't depend on, say, getting a CPU for 1 minute or even for any dedicated period of time. That's not what unit testing is for. And ultimately, my fixes to the list and watch race were sufficient to stabilize my PR, and the tests running with that PR. It really was so that changing the behavior of wait for cache sync made that known race in client Go, the fake testing client Go, just happen more often. And I think that ultimately was it. So once I had a proper fix for that, things turned quite well and turned out to be more stable. So that's done. We, I think last time, talked a bit about Ginkgo labeling. So one PR got merged, thanks to Antonio. But other work is still ongoing. I think I need Ben now for that. He started reviewing, and I need him to finish that. Perhaps as a general reminder, I have a few more PRs linked in the agenda that are also ready. Yeah, the second one is the one that I just mentioned. Move meta tags to the end of test names. That's the Ginkgo one. That's older. The one at the top, the one that you're currently showing, check log output for data races. That's an interesting thing. For a long time, Kubernetes only had data race detection enabled for unit tests. But unit tests are simple. They don't exercise all the code. They don't exercise concurrency that well. So a lot of bugs were not detected when just running Go test with race for unit tests. I set up already, I think 2 years ago, an integration job that does data race detection in integration tests. That also found a few things. It's still kind of an ongoing experiment. I need to transfer responsibility for that job to SIG release, but now it is stable. It works, and only other flaky integration tests show up in that job. So overall, I think it's good and fine. Now I'm turning my attention towards checking actual clusters, our control plane components, our binaries, kubelet, Kube API server, Kube controller manager, all of those components can be compiled with race detection, but we had no way of actually exercising that and doing that in practice. So I had already merged a PR to build these binaries with data race detection enabled. And now with that ongoing PR, I have set up a cluster where those instrumented binaries run, and the PR checks the log output. The data race detector basically just emits something on standard error when it finds problems. And we still need a component that watches out for those data race reports and turns them into some kind of failure that is visible in our CI. And that's what this PR does. It sets up log output monitoring of all the control plane components running in certain system namespaces. That works with kind, because all components are pods and can be queried through the API server, so you can get their output. And for the kubelet, I also found a solution where I'm using a feature. It's off by default, but can be enabled in the cluster to basically read the journal, the systemd journal. And that, again, no surprise, found some problems. That's at the top of this PR. Some of them have been fixed, others haven't. So some PRs for problems that were found still need to be merged. And if you run the dedicated job with race detection enabled, it will fail and correctly report these known data races. But again, Ben is reviewing that, and I hope he'll finish. So these are the two first PRs that I mentioned. The third one, the policy for pre-submits, that's an old PR. It's a community pull request with just documentation. I think it goes into our sig-testing directory there. That is also something where I need to ping Ben, I guess, when he's available again, because he did have comments, unresolved comments from way back last year. And once we have that policy in place, then we can do some enforcement of this policy in test infra to make sure that pre-submit jobs really follow those policies. But I think we need to do the policy first, because that sets the base and the expectation.
Yeah, I just joined. Sorry,
Hi Ben.
again
Hello.
been slammed. I want to say both of these are things that have been discussed previously that like we should do. I just am behind on the code diffs, especially I recall the log one is kind of large. This one I think I just didn't get to the ping yet. I should look today.
Yeah.
Also, everyone else
thanks.
is welcome to take a pass at these. These are, I think these are important future direction.
Yeah, it's definitely good to bring that up and get the group's attention on these. It shouldn't just be Ben, me, and Antonio doing these things behind the scenes. So some visibility is good. But I think Michelle, for example, looked at this one here also.
I did look
Yeah.
a long while ago. I might as well
I-
take another look though, because I think he made a couple changes in the meanwhile.
Yeah, perhaps take another look. Okay. Yeah, I think that's what I had. I just basically wanted to summarize and get attention to these things. And but Ben, no pressure. Yeah, I know we know you're busy, and if
Yeah,
other
I
things are more
apologize.
important.
I've got a few things to sort out, and I'm
Yeah.
also contesting with the rather tight kept timeline this release. There's also a background thread going on right now where Kubernetes is behind on Go CVE patching. Go dropped like 6 CVEs last week.
Yeah, there's always something. I know.
Yeah, I think the concept for both of these is really good. I don't I got a little caught up reviewing some of it. Like I noticed we wound up having to like redefine some standard lib utilities locally and that sort of thing. Like it's these are tricky.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
I'm done. The next topic, Arnaud.
I think next one is or no?
Yeah, Happy New Year. Late Happy New Year. So we over the last year I talked to Lambda AI, which is a neo cloud focused on providing GPUs for everyone about getting some credit, and we got them. Now I'm trying to figure out how to integrate that with the current CI and maybe I think the first audience should be like sub-project like Q jobs and stuff like that. So I don't know what's the policy around integration. I vibe coded a cube test tool deployer over the holidays. So if that's okay, we should initiate a donation process to integrate that somewhere. My last command will basically give you the link. So I'm trying to get like ideas about basically how to maximize that integration. Basically, context, we get GPUs we cannot get without reservation on classic, I'm putting quote, classic provider like AWS on Amazon. Yes, Ben. Ben has.
I cannot see hands right now. Go for it.
Camera is not working.
So it turns out that my video crashes the web client. So they're still trying to push us to use. Okay. Quick questions. You say you have a kubetest 2 deployer. Like what is it deploying? Like a cluster from source or
No, it's like creating the only thing it's doing right now is just creating GPU instances. And I think the idea is basically either integrate that in existing kubetest tool so we can leverage other deployer to like either like kind, for example, or like just
I see.
yeah.
So like for example, we have the kind. It's actually not in upstream currently, but like we do have, for example, for rootless testing, there is a deployer that does do something like that. It like creates a VM in which it will then run a kind cluster. I'm not sure if that will fit right here because GPU support is a little wonky at the moment due to privileged container interactions with mounting GPUs.
Yeah.
NVIDIA has a custom thing, but it only works for NVIDIA GPUs and has to make some assumptions, and it's a fork. Anyhow, I think that's probably worth figuring out because one of the other things is we have kind of an awkward split on where the deployers go, but I think like we could sponsor a repo or something like that, but we probably want to think about like what exactly we're trying to deploy and test with this. Like
Uh,
like is Sig-testing running looking to run things with GPUs or like
more like it's like a how to say it's a not a service we want to provide for people interested to test with real hardware. if someone like drops it, basically say want to like run tests, iterate tests using real GPUs, because it could happen in some case, or DRA want to like run tests with real hardware, it's an option we want to put on the table.
Right. We should probably figure out if we can. In that case, I think that you probably want something like KOps or something like that to deploy to it. The problem with just running a kind cluster on that is that we already have the ability to offer these projects like here's a tiny toy cluster with a GPU. We
Yeah.
have that on like AWS and GCP. We haven't set up a lot of accounts with quota for that, but it hasn't been a big cost issue and we don't use it very heavily. We just do some very trivial testing of like cube up, and I forget what we're running on AWS. I think the EC2 deployer, quote unquote. So like I think where this could be really valuable for those projects is if they have something where they have a reason they want to run with like, a larger cluster with some number of GPUs, like maybe testing, scheduling for DRA or something like that. And if that's the case, then you want like a multi-node cluster. Otherwise I would imagine something like, oh, we want to run some services that leverage this kind of compute, and then that'll look very different from a kubetest deployer.
Okay.
Yeah, so I don't know how that works. I admit I'm not familiar enough with this, even though we have some folks in the community working there. Like,
Oh, the Lambda API is kind of straightforward. They basically bootstrap GPU instances, only GPU instances. The notion they have a managed Kubernetes service, but it's private right now,
okay,
which means like you have to go through some contract to get to it. So it's not
I see.
available for us. So
Well, that would also
currently,
be something we'd use for like running a service.
yeah.
But for like testing Kubernetes stuff from source, if we want to do that, then I mean, ideal is if something like Cluster API or KF can support it, but I don't know if anybody like has that already. Um,
Yeah, and I think what you say is good guidance. You should basically, I already talked to Chaos folks, so the idea would be, because this was also one option to consider, the idea will be to build a something to do auto scaling and scheduling,
mhm.
maybe a carpenter provider or an integration with a cluster autoscaler. So yeah, I
Okay.
wanted to
Well,
basically a validation of basically which path we want to use.
I
Because
think we should ask around for like what the demand, like use cases are for this, because
yeah,
that'll help us figure out like like for example, if we don't actually need to test Kubernetes from source and we're testing something that you install on top, then it might be best for us to just pursue access to their managed clusters.
yeah, yeah,
Um, versus like I don't want to totally try to like volunteer a project like KOps to implement something like this, but at the same time, if we're looking at implementing a deployer, I think we should talk to them before we get too far along in owning another cluster tool. The last time sig-testing did this was kind, and that has had some interesting friction with like minikube and the sig cluster lifecycle space. I don't want to jump straight in that again, especially because we already have some like under maintained sig-testing sort of de facto owns KubeUp at this point after cluster lifecycle created it, and we already have a bunch of like half maintained E2E test tooling. So I'm a little wary of like building another custom thing to where we go it alone without a really strong use case. Like with kind, we were blocked in. How are we going to run clusters inside Pro? This time it seems like we probably have some options to pursue.
okay.
But again, going back to, I think that we'll know which ones are best to invest in based on what sort of things people are interested in testing with this. I wonder. I mean, we could go to a couple of the SIGs or maybe like the chair and tech lead meeting or something to raise the like, hey, we have this new resource and we have some ideas, but like, what are you looking for?
Yeah, I would talk to Working Group Batch and
say Sig Network, the like AI the gateway and stuff. We had some back
Yeah.
and forth when I was a K-Temper lead where they were like wanting to performance test things. I think there are still other problems with that, like licensing around the real models that we're going to use, but like that conversation might be something we could follow up. Patrick's here. I don't know if you know if like DRA is looking for again at like scale testing with hardware or something like that.
We are simulating it because at the scale that we want to simulate nodes, we can't pay for the cluster. Like
That's kind of what I thought. Like, I imagine even with this, like, do you have some rough number on like what kind of scale you're?
500 or more.
Yeah, we probably don't want to
we
actually
might even
spend it.
I might even go up to 5,000 now. I'm not
Okay.
up to date
So
on
yeah, we
other
probably don't want
instruments.
to actually spin up like 500 or 5,000 GPUs just to show that like the core TRA logic works. Even with the donation, that seems like probably not the most appropriate use of resources.
And also for testing real drivers, that would be out of scope to some extent for what we are doing upstream. Because
Mhm.
if that's real hardware, we need a real driver for it. So we
Right.
end up testing a provider's DRA
Well,
driver.
we do that pretty often though.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like for example, container runtime is pluggable, bring your own, but it's not very practical to test most of Kubernetes without using something. We have that in a bunch of like most of the places in the project where you can like bring a driver. We do wind up testing some real drivers quietly because like how do we test the other side of it?
With DRA, with DRA, we have alternatives. We have test drivers and the example drivers that can be used to simulate much more than the vendor drivers actually do in practice at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And then we don't need to test with real hardware and a real driver.
Well, it sounds to me like probably the main areas we should talk to are batch and networking, since they have things like DRA net does actually interact with some of this hardware. I'm not sure in this case. I don't know enough about what they're offering, but like I think that Signet would know where they would use it for their stuff, and batch both jump to mind.
Okay, sounds good to me. I think that's the right direction. Like basically talk to project running stuff on top of an existing Kubernetes cluster and see what's happening.
Yeah, and then like, you know, I think at sig-testing I want to unblock you, but I would consider it sort of a last resort where we wind up like owning a deployer that has some like thing totally specific to this environment for creating clusters that we wind up owning as the Kubernetes project, as sort of like a side thing to the other cluster deployment tools that we have, and we're trying to converge away from like kubeup being a thing that is only used in CI that no one else helps us with, versus like KOps actually having some both CI and production use to get a little bit more support behind it.
Okay. I'm done. So for this session.
It's like Kate Zimperus here. I just noticed we also need to figure out what to do to replace the bit.ly link for to the notes.
Huh.
We're
Oh,
gonna go
really?
like, well, so Bitly started doing things like serving an ad in between, and like,
Ah,
so we moved some things in the project to like go.kates.io links, or like, yeah, we have some options. I'm not
I think
sure what we want to recommend, but we should probably switch that at some point on the meeting.
the real I don't want to say the real. I think we should build a redirect. That would be the real option. Something maybe driven by the Kubernetes resource model, or like basically a YAML file where we put like path and direct link. But I don't know who's gonna build this. I would say that's the real, basically build an opinion redirect. I took a look at another option will be to deploy gateway API. GKE are basically something built in inside GKE cluster, but there are limitations about like some regex, but it's still work in process on gateway API.
We are using Gateway already for like Prow.
Yes, but like uh, our current redirects. So GK Gateway API don't have all the feature needed to replace our current redirect with Gateway API.
Uh-huh.
We will need to go through a different implementation if we want to do that. That's
Okay.
like another option. Like short term, yeah, we can put link in the
Maybe
redirect.
just a Go link then.
Yeah,
Go to go.kates.io.
yeah.
Okay. I don't
That's
think it's
like
super high priority, but like that might be a fairly easy contribution item if someone wants to like PR the Go link to the notes, and then one like Michelle or I think can update the actual invite to point to the Go link.
That seems reasonable. That also makes it easier to swap out the node stock if we ever want.
Yeah, I mean that's what part of what the Bitly link was supposed to do, but like I doubt we have access to edit it at this point, and we already have a bunch of redirects that the project hosts ourselves, so we can do something like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'll add your link in the notes, or no. I think you had a couple other items as well, if you want to go through those.
yeah, I will give you the third one or the second one, I think. It's about basically telling to people that we have like a pre-alpha deployment of test grid.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think that's fair for you to bring up since Kate's Infra is the one who set it up. But yeah, there is pre-alpha is a good way to put it. There's a very basically like the open source version of the test grid UI components is up and running now, thanks to Kate's Infra folks. So you can see a very similar to the current UI, which is the closed source one that everybody sees at testgrid.case.io. It is usable. You can go to different things. We are aware of some things though for like there's some feature gaps between the new components and the currently used stuff, largely around the actual grid view rather than like a bunch of the other smaller components. We're also aware of some performance issues where it just takes a while to load things. Um, and yeah, these links exist, but do not do all of the correct things that are expected. We're missing some of the other things for like manipulating the more complicated views, etc. But it is here to try out. And Brady and I think we're potentially looking at some of the other things to kind of close some of those feature gaps. There's also some other interests as well.
This is really cool. I have multiple questions.
Yeah, go for it.
Um, so I noticed that it's a little slow loading. Is
Yep.
that something where we can like throw more resources at the deployment, or do we think that there's like it needs implementation work to like performance work?
I think it might be. So there's a bit that's unclear. Sorry, one moment. Backend is still on the Google project. I am hoping to get some time to move that this quarter, especially because that will be like a better separation of ownership for other reasons. I currently though the API backend component does not have very good logs or introspection for performance. I suspect that there are problems with just how the API works and its performance that are like a bottleneck for this working. There may also be some problems with the UI components themselves in terms of loading. That definitely is observed for larger grids. It shouldn't be a problem on smaller grids though, because like the performance of rendering that really shouldn't be that bad right now. The responses itself from the API are pretty bad though.
But that's the piece that's still running in Google.
That's the piece is still running in Google. It's
Okay.
possible that that is a resource issue. It's also possible that's just like an issue in the logic that needs to be fixed because the API is not in frequent use, so it hasn't had a lot of like improvements made over time.
Cool. I just want to check like whatever we're running if we spot check if like we can if it's something where we're like maxing out the cores or whatever, we can like throw a little more at it. We have other things that we're running kind of similar to this where we have gone out of our way to just throw some cs.kates.io. cs.kates.io had performance issues, and we're just like, you know what, this is like fairly useful to the project. It isn't going to cost us that much, and we threw like, at one point it was running on bare metal. At a later point, we just threw some very fast, I think, GC instance with like local SSD at it, and like now it actually performs pretty well. But we did have to like circle back and tweak that. The other question I had was, is this something that's easy for someone to like? Is there a guide for deploy locally and iterate on?
Yes. So one of the nice things with some of the more modern UI components that we have is it is easy to test in a couple ways. You should be able to run a local instance with fake data. There are commands in the Kate-Sig's test grid repo. You should be able to run a local instance with the Kate's data, similar to this. And you should also be able to run like just the UI components to quickly check like what ones we have via the storybook commands. They should all be listed in the repo. If those instructions are missing, then I missed that and somebody can file an issue for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Last one, and then I think Mohammed has his hand up.
Yeah,
so
sorry.
it looks like we're trying to like match everything that's available in the previous the like test grid Kates.io. Is it possible or desirable to like point this at a config that's specific to this instance where we could say only have Kubernetes test grids? At some point, I think when this is mature and the project can run it itself, it's going to be a bit of a question if we should still be hosting like Red Hat dashboards or like, some of these are not named very clearly. Like the Amazon one is actually like upstream things, but like say the Istio one, that's not a Kubernetes project. And if they can run their own, they probably would, but we also have to consider like decoupling. I'm wondering if while this is still not very highly used, if it makes sense to go ahead and like make a shadow config for this instance. It's like, this is what Kubernetes will run, and at some point Google will stop just running like test grid for everyone publicly, and you'll need to run your own instance of this. If we already moved the new one up front to like the things we're going to host, then that might be a way to handle the transition, that just like they're available in parallel and the new one from the beginning only hosts like ourselves.
Yeah, I think that's doable, especially if somebody has a very clear idea of what are this is one of the things that I wasn't sure if I wanted to do at the time of like moving the instance out of the Google project or not, but at that time would be pretty reasonable. If we like know what the config would be for just the Kate's stuff, then it should be like we should be able to just have a separate config serve this one.
Yeah, I'm not sure that mechanics of like actually making that config, but I think it would be fairly straightforward for one of us to help identify like which things are in fact dashboards for the Kubernetes project versus not for the Kubernetes project. Like,
Yeah,
I
the
can pretty
config.
quickly skim through this and just like write down a list of like, these are us and these are not. I don't know how we would manage that, but I think that's something to think about. Like maybe if we have an allow list or something.
The config should not be difficult. The part that I have a problem with is just knowing which ones we like are literally part of the Kubernetes project or are like allowed basically
Well, I think the other trick
versus
would be
not.
like keeping it in sync. So that's what I'm like. Maybe we should do something like synthesizing it from the original config, but then like filtering in or out some of them or something like that. I'm not sure what's the most reasonable way to manage that. But as far as actually identifying them, I can help with that. I think Kate's Info folks can help with that. We can figure that out. One of the tells actually should be if there was a way to auto derive it. These are associated with where the actual data is stored, right? We're not allowing third parties to upload data to our bucket for the stored prout results. So if we could filter by which dashboards only read from our bucket, then that would be the actual source of truth. Is like, is this a Kate's Infra bucket that the test results are stored in? Yes, no. If it's not, then I think I think it might make sense to just never serve it on this domain, so that we can start to create that like transition, and then eventually they can run their own of this when the backend is available.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, if you can all give me a list, I can start looking at where we actually source it from because between config merger and other things, I think it should be easy to make something that can keep the config in sync, and then just some other
Well,
rejiggering to make sure that it works with like this instance versus the current.
spitballing it just now, I think actually probably the best way to do it would be if there's a, I forget how all the test grid config layout works, but if there's some way we can like read back from, does this use like which buckets it's reading from, that part shouldn't change much for us versus which dashboards we have will probably change all the time. But if we can compute this dashboard reads from this bucket, we can very easily have a stable, rarely updated list of like, these are our buckets and anything else is not us.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's just a little bit more involved to check, but that shouldn't be too hard.
Okay, if that's not too terrible, that would be I think that would be a really useful feature to help us start to surface like, you can, this is how we're going to shift off of the like Google operated one. We will start to run this instance and other people can run their own instance, and the new instance forward will not have it, and we'll keep the test grid K8s.io around for some time, and eventually maybe or maybe not they'll need to move off of that one.
Mm-hmm.
Mohammed?
Yeah, Mohammed.
Oh, hi there. Sorry, I joined a
Hi.
bit late.
No worries.
I had a crack at these test grid boards a while back. I pruned a bunch.
Oh,
Yeah, so this was a couple of months ago. The as it currently stands, I'm looking at the test grids defined in Kubernetes slash test info repository. You pruned a bunch from there. There's still candidates for more to prune from the top list. The main outliers are from KCP's one. The IBM ones, they've been transitioned onto, well, they already did. We transitioned those into in-house jobs that we actually run on the Prow on our Prow instance. The other ones are kind of the same thing. There's one big folder called OpenShift with a lot of Red Hat stuff in there. So somebody needs to have a conversation with Red Hat, figure that one out. But going back to the poor performance, so right now this UI is hosted right next to the other Prow pod, so it's in the Prow cluster itself. Some action items are build image automatically and auto bump it. We haven't done that yet. No, so the KCP Istio ones, they all come from the Google buckets. They get merged with our buckets and they appear there. But for things that we control, there's the stuff in that repo that we should have conversations with people about offloading things. But yeah, back to the slow performance. I think I mentioned this before. Like we do client-side rendering, and it's not good. We should be rendering most of the stuff server side and handing a rendered HTML slash JavaScript to the client where it's all done server side.
yeah, I agree with that. I think the problem is there's also, or sorry, I'm biased because like I'm a little bit more familiar with the backend stuff. The backend is also very slow to respond, and the API really should not be that slow to respond given the size of this instance. This is far smaller than the other test grid
Yeah,
instance I'm familiar with, and it
so the
should not
AI,
be
so the
computationally
API,
expensive.
now that we host it correctly and we're not proxying it, the API can access the bucket directly. It's on a node that's very large and with no contention.
But the
The
API
file
also needs
control
to be
plane is
like,
oversized.
yeah, given that the API has direct access and whatnot, it has no excuse for, in a lot of these cases, like taking this long to respond. Never mind like the actual render time and whatnot. The
I mean,
render
we
time,
can poke
I
at the
agree,
API
needs some.
separately and see how fast it should respond. It's hosted correctly and it's fine. We could poke at the API response, the response behavior and see how we could make that better. But I have another question though. as Googlers, when do you plan on letting the community run things like test grid, tabularize, summarize, and all those components that are living in the Kubernetes, that are living in the Google Cloud Platform repositories?
I think any time is fine. It really just like I've been the blocker on it because I'm the most relevant person with access to the project and have just been like not able to prioritize it. So if somebody wants to ping me about it and uh, whatnot, I will get a move on it. Otherwise, that really just is the blocker. Nothing actually prevents, like, for instance, just taking all of the stuff and running it. I think it really just is like it's been I need to take the time to look at it, look at where it goes in Kate's infra, make some PRs.
Has it changed that last time I poked at this, the thing was that you couldn't actually run a whole stack yet.
You
So
could,
I want okay, like
or you should be able to.
end to end. Like with this UI, no components run by Google.
Yeah. I think the UI has been the actual blocker for like a true instance, but I believe there's no reason that we couldn't do the rest of it at least. Like the full backend should be doable.
Yeah, but what we want is for the Kubernetes project to host the API and the generation and all the background processing
Yeah, I'm
components,
counting that all as backend.
hand
That
that
all
stuff
makes
over, and then let the Google UI pull it from our public API instance.
sure, that makes sense. The thing is that we have a limited access to Michelle's time, and I think that the most impactful part for us is helping figure out how we get to the place where the UI is open source. Then we all will, we can all work on like getting instances running. But if we get like part of the stack running under us and other parts of the stack don't exist yet as open source, I think
Well, my understanding was the
that's a lot harder
API
for us to sort
and the
out without
business
Michelle's.
logic and all of the bits and bobs is open source. The only thing is you're missing the UI, which we now have, but it's a little bit janky.
Everything is open source for the backend. The new front end is open source, which is missing feature gaps that are kind of listed in the Kate sig-testing repo. Other than that, yeah, it really just is currently it is only living in the Kate's project. It is only deployed there and everything is stored there as well. So those things need to be migrated.
Just to clarify, the terminology has confused me a little bit in test grid. When we say
Yeah.
the UI is open source, do we mean the code running in the browser, or do we also mean like the server that responds to the code in the browser? Because in the past, both of those things were not open, and then there's like the test grid backend was largely meaning the like data ingestion logic, but not necessarily referring to the API service that the web code queries.
Those
Is
are separate now because the API is now a separate backend instance rather than being bundled with the like whole UI bit.
Mhm.
So yeah, I believe the API itself is fully open source. So all of the things that the front end is relying on in terms of the data it needs to grab should be open source. Again, it's just in the Google project. That's all.
Okay.
And then the actual stuff for viewing things in the browser and whatnot is the stuff in the Kate sig testing. Sorry, Kate sig test grid
In
repo.
in that case, I think instead of trying to have more like hybrid ones, what we should do is we should get testgrid.prow.case.io to run fully on the external stack, and instead of doing work on the internal stack to mix it, like just leave testgrid.case.io working how it works today, but get testgrid.prow.case.io running like fully on Kate's infra end to end.
I agree with that. I
And
think
then
that's
we can just
cleaner.
iterate on, then we can focus on the like get the open source one working in parallel without spending time disrupting the previous one. The other reason for that is, like I said, for the projects that aren't Kubernetes, I think one of the cleanest ways for us to exit that mess is to say, well, those are still available on testgrid.kates.io as long as Google is willing to host them. And for the immediate future, like Kubernetes can also just say, fine, like here's the subdomain that's not a significant use of our resources. and those projects can, when test grid Prow K8s.io matures, they can start running their own instance, and we can figure out if we want to phase out. But that's a lot less confusing if there's like one stack that's operated by Google other than literally just a domain, and there's another stack that's run by Kubernetes for Kubernetes, only surfacing Kubernetes things from the beginning. That is the model for like, if Red Hat wants to start running one, like, start doing this, run this stack.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. Like when I've talked about migrating in the first place, like effectively I've meant standing up a duplicate instance that does the same things using the like basically duplicating the configuration we already have for deploying the backend stuff in test grid.
Yeah, because that avoids us getting into some kind of messy situation where like once we're ready to like fully migrate Kubernetes, but then like test grid K8s.io depends on like Kubernetes still running things for these other projects, as opposed to just lending a subdomain that isn't really a budget. Like the fixed cost there is the domain and the DNS infrastructure. We don't really care that much about I suppose there's DNS queries for it. We'd probably want to exit it eventually, but
Yeah.
Given that we'd have had it for like a decade plus, I don't think anybody would be in a big rush about it.
I agree.
Also, I think a new subdomain, a new domain or new address with a fresh UI, I think it's an easy sell. With all the components behind it, having policy ABCDF, and the stack is hosted end to end by us, and here's the source code for it.
Yeah. So Michelle, if you can take a look at like how we would wrangle this like only Kubernetes dashboards, if better than me, like if there's some way that it would, if I could give you like a list of buckets, if we can derive it from that, or if that's going to be too much of a headache and we need some other way. If you can figure that out,
we already know which ones they are. Look here. So
data source.
Yeah, it's here.
I truly do not have a good idea off the top of my head of which ones count as what. So if somebody can just literally give me the list of these ones should be in K8s and shouldn't. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I just put in the chat.
Okay.
So yeah.
Yeah, the merge list is that sufficient? Because the merge list is the one that I was going to look at, but I don't know if there's ones that go in the default configuration that don't belong in K8s.
I don't. We should check.
So the one that says name
merge
empty,
list is
referencing our buckets. Yeah, so the first entry is the Kubernetes project. Everything else is not Kubernetes project. They're test grids for other people.
That one is obvious for those. Is there anything in here that doesn't count also that we want to filter out?
Oh, yes, we have a few things in there that don't count as ours. The OpenShift stuff.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. If there was a way to filter them based on the bucket that they read the.
Oh, okay. So for those, there's a folder in our repository that we own that has a list of all of that in there. So if you scroll up a bit, if you go back to our message at 39 past, you can see it. That folder has the config that generates that bucket. So yeah, that one. Yeah, so if you go to config, yep, and then go test grids. Yeah, so yeah, this folder generates our bucket. So yeah, and we have stuff in here that shouldn't be here.
Okay, I guess that's all. I am happy to figure out like a config that works with all of these. It's just literally which ones. Like, is it literally only Kubernetes, or are some of these actually?
Well, that's what I didn't mean. I meant the mechanics of how we would like keep something like that generated, because like Mohammed or I can help point you to which things are genuinely us or not. What I'm not so sure about is like, say if I could point to just like the list of buckets that the test results are stored in and which ones aren't us, is there a reasonable way to derive a config from that that's filtered? Or like, do we need to know like on a like per dashboard basis just the dashboard names or something? Because we can come up with something.
No, buckets should be doable. Like if it is a clean enough line to do it from that, then
it's not the config bucket. It is the test result bucket.
Yeah.
The config bucket is mixed right now. Because all the things that are Kubernetes are in that like Kate's test grid config bucket, except that also has like OpenShift and stuff.
Yeah, no, that's why I'm wondering if it's like a clean enough thing, because like, yeah, I am talking about
But
like the
like
test group source.
the bucket where the like JUnits are, that one we're not mixing. Like OpenShift is not uploading to our prow logs bucket.
Mm-hmm.
So all of the things that are genuinely Kubernetes at this point should be in like one JUnit.
Yeah, it'll be fine.
Okay, if we are sure on that, I can just maybe
But
have
I don't.
the updated logic to figure out, or sorry, to get a list of those, and if anything looks wrong, we can talk about it. But
Well, my concern was that like that's kind of like a couple degrees removed from the like dashboard configs. So I don't know if that's too messy. If that's too messy, then we can come up with something like a list of dashboard names, or we could try to figure out if we can split the config buckets. If like Mohammed, maybe Kate's Infra can create another config bucket
But we
that
can.
for like transition, and then we could like shunt off like OpenShift and whatever into that new config bucket, and then we can say like, or vice versa, we can leave OpenShift, and because I think that is Kate's test grid config owned by Kubernetes.io, or is that in Google.com?
So Kate's test grid dash config is owned by us, I believe.
Okay, then let's make a second one that's owned by us and like move the like OpenShift and stuff into that one, and then if like Michelle, if we said there's a config bucket and we just skip the merge list, is that easy?
I believe so.
I
Well,
think maybe we should do that then, and then just like split the things that aren't us into another like merge bucket.
yeah, that part is easy. I think the only problem is like again, if we want to keep the current test grid case.io up without yeah. We just need to do it with a new backend to not pollute the current one.
Right, but we're planning to stand up an end-to-end
Yeah.
backend new one, so that new backend would just not use this merge list, and the new merge list would just be like one bucket.
Yeah, that was going to be my suggestion basically is like the test grid backend basically says like point to this location for the configuration. Config merger makes it easy to stand up a single configuration to point to, but you can always just point to a different one instead.
So we could just point to the one that's in the one bucket and skip the config
Yeah,
merging.
absolutely.
And so then all we need to do is in this current one, we need to like make another bucket and move some things to that one that we won't pick up in the Kate's for operated instance.
Yeah.
And then that would be another thing long term that we'd eventually be like, hey, OpenShift, can you like stop sending PRs to test infra and like hosting config in our bucket and stuff. But like long term, when we're happy with the new, like when we're transitioning fully to the new instance.
Yeah, so we could get them to transition with us. We could talk to them, be like, hey, we're doing this exercise. Your board's no longer qualified. By the way, we're building a new backend. It looks like this. You copy and paste this, drop it in your Proud cluster.
Yeah.
Oh, and we have a polished UI here. Go and deploy it too, and let's split it from here.
Other than that, also like the transition path is like they can still use the old merged config at testgrid.io for now that's run by Google, but like they're interested. Like I know in that case they're interested to run their own, but like for example, some of the other CNCF projects it might take a little bit to sort out, like how and where they're going to run one, and we probably wouldn't want to push them all to do it until we feel like the new instance is like mature and running smooth and at least close enough feature parity. Like for example, the links clicking through is probably a big one.
Yeah. They
For now,
exist, but they are
like
bad.
we probably don't want to tell people they have to get off of the like Google operated one yet. But if we can set up the community operated one from the beginning to not be hosting these other ones, then we can just say, look, like it's no different than today. Like the existing one works as long as like Google and Michelle keep it working for you. But like you should know that now that Kubernetes is transitioning towards the open source one, that you probably need to move. And what we don't want is that they just move over to like it's the same situation, but like Kate's Infra is now responsible for it. So if we can maybe Mohammed, as we're standing up the community operated instance of the stack, we can
I mean, we could write a
split the
policy that
merge
says,
list.
hey, as of 2026, we're not accepting non-Kubernetes, anything that doesn't run in the Kubernetes Prime instance. No new
Right.
boards that don't run there.
But I think mechanically to do that, we'll need to go split this the Kate's test grid config bucket. Should we file a like Kate's IO ticket?
Yeah, please do. I'll work on it. Can we look at that enforced CPU memory ceiling issue
Yeah.
briefly?
That was the last one I had on the agenda.
Yeah, that's actually my issue. So yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
All
Last
right.
bit to close it up. Also feel free to tag me on that issue.
Okay. Kind of self-explanatory, but the idea is our current build nodes are 8 cores, 64 gigs of memory, super oversized. We don't really have any power jobs that need that much memory. I so this PR will now enforce a ceiling cap of 7 cores and 27 gigs of memory. The remaining half core and 1 gig RAM goes to any agents that we're gonna run on the nodes. So I have been slowly right-sizing outliers. There's no reason why Kubernetes unit test needs 40 gigs of memory. It runs just fine with 12. So now it's capped at like 20 something. Um, so yeah, so that's what the PR is. We can't merge it yet because there are still jobs that need to be right-sized, but they're very small now. It's like a small number left. I'm still right-sizing jobs as we go along, but
Yeah, I think most of these were just wrong. The couple of scale jobs historically were doing this, both because they did use large at the end and because the when some to like for eviction selection reasons, right? Like
okay, Google.
so because like if your utilization is like ultra low, then you won't be selected for eviction. And we used to have big problems with like 14-hour scale jobs getting evicted in the middle. Um,
Well, we
uh,
have something that says don't evict my pod, right?
right. But that's what
Now,
I'm
so
saying.
it's
I
not an
think
issue
that like
anymore.
a few of the ones that were at some point legitimately doing this, it was just um aggressive pulling all the stops like eviction prevention because we'd had intermittent problems with that. We have other options for that now. The rest are probably just like bad copy paste or something.
Yeah, they are. Also, the AWS node is super huge, so that's gonna change as well. We're gonna have all the nodes look the same. 8 cores, 32 gigs of memory. Kubernetes is this thing. Well, GKE is this thing where they steal a bit of memory, not like to allocate it.
Yeah.
I have not seen that in EKS or AKS for that matter. But yeah, based on that calculation, the
We should
max we're gonna allow test pods to assume is that much, 7
okay.
cores and
We should
26
treat
gigs
it
of
that
memory.
way anyhow though, because you need some amount of resources for like, kube proxy or other system daemons
Yeah,
and
we understand.
kubelet. So if it's not, if they don't have any reserved, then we should probably still make an assumption about some
Yeah,
amount of system overhead.
yeah. Now this limit is going to be codified, so if anybody tries to create a job that needs more than that, it will error and warn them that they can't do that. And we need to have a conversation with those people and figure out what they're doing that needs that.
Cool.
So yeah,
Cool.
I'll fix up the remaining jobs, and once the test is green, I will ping everybody again to get it merged.
Yeah,
Sweet.
I don't know if you're still here, but between me, Patrick, feel free to like shoot me a like DM and Slack or something when you have something like this that's backlogged and needs review. GitHub notifications can get overwhelming.
Oh
um,
yeah, they do.
but like you know, there's been enough back and forth helping each other that even if these weren't like I think important anyhow, I'd be happy to prioritize reviews from you folks. Just send me a reminder if it's been stuck.
I will.
Yeah,
Some of these
I'll
things
keep
gotta
that in
match up.
mind. I don't want to interrupt you too often. That's the other side of a coin. So, but I'll
Yeah, but I actually don't. So personally, for Slack, it also gets bad like that. So I don't actually have push notifications on for Slack. I will check intermittently when the tab is marked as having one, and it's a lot easier to sift through like Patrick notified me than just like GitHub notification UI doesn't surface that as clearly. It just says like here's all the people on this thread or whatever as a huge list. Well, you don't have to, but it's an option. If you shoot a note to us, I think that's also true for like say Antonio and most of the other leads. Like
I do. I'm just a bit more careful with you because sometimes I have impression that you're just really busy, and I don't want to push you towards looking at things that might be lower priority. That's all.
Fair, but like when it's
I
for, like,
certainly
or
do that with
something.
people. Yeah, but
Understood, and I also try to be respectful of that. But I think that if you had something that's been open for like a month and we want to get it in before before things get really busy and release or something like that, feel free to, and I'll do my best.
Yeah, that's fine. But I think it's also worthwhile sharing these things here, so it's not a waste of our time giving other people an insight into what's going on. I think that's also useful.
Absolutely. But I also have missed a number of these due to conflicts and things this year. So if you like that one that Mohammed was just raising, I think that's been open for like months without like major feedback. I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but like, yeah, we should probably wrap that up. Admittedly, today I'm going to probably mostly be working on a KEP so I can present it at API Machinery tomorrow. But like, I do want to get to these things this week, especially like something like anywhere where we have like a more major change like that policy one. It's a good idea to try to land those early in the release. I've been we're actually over time, but I've been meaning to bring to this meeting if we should put beta tests into pre-submit. I think that's something we should take a look at this year.
Yeah,
that's a good idea if it's the kind ones.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. We did a whole set of alpha beta testing last year, and we tightened that up quite a bit for like release and things. But one of the ones that seems like it might plausibly be a gap is that if you have a beta that's not on by default, you might even be going to GA and like surprise, and now your test is a blocking pre-submit, and it turns out it's not in good shape. In theory, some of that should be covered by the release blocking jobs, but I don't know. I think we should be taking a look at that. It was one of the things we mentioned with our plan for the alpha and beta coverage last year that we haven't followed up on yet because it took till the end of the year to get the release blocking stuff.
I think this is good. I put up the next agenda slot if folks want to add stuff to that, or if not, mention in Slack. I am also going to need to cut this because I need to go.
Thanks, Michelle.
Yeah. No, thanks everybody. Thanks again for like all the discussion. I think this is great. Apologies for cutting it short. Okay. Good to see everyone.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.